Imagine, if you will, a world without cities, without roads, without any of the things we know today. Let us travel back in time, not just a few hundred years but millions of years. We are going on an extraordinary journey. This journey will take us to the very beginning of our own story. We will explore a planet that is both familiar and strangely different. It is a time when the first glimmers of human existence were just beginning to appear on the horizon. This adventure will allow us to walk in the footsteps of our most distant ancestors, to see the world through their eyes and understand the challenges they faced every single day. Our time machine is our imagination, and our destination is a prehistoric Earth. The air is clean and crisp, filled with scents we no longer recognize. The sounds are of the wind in ancient trees and the calls of animals long extinct. There are no maps to guide us, only the sun, the moon, the stars. We must forget everything we know about our modern lives. We need to shed our comfortable habits and our reliance on technology. This journey requires us to think like our ancestors did, to feel their fears, their hopes, and their incredible resilience in a world that was wild, untamed, and often very dangerous. We will witness the dawn of human ingenuity. We will see how the first simple tools were created. These were not machines, but stones shaped with purpose and skill. They learned which plants were safe to eat, which were poisonous. They watched the movements of animals to hunt them for food. They found shelter in caves and under rocky overhangs to protect themselves from the elements and from predators. It was a life of constant struggle, but also one of profound connection with the natural world around them. This exploration is not just about survival. It is about the very essence of what it means to be human. We will uncover the first sparks of community and cooperation. We will see how our ancestors began to live together in small groups, sharing food, protecting one another. This was the beginning of society. It was in these small, fragile communities that the foundations of our own world were laid. So, let us begin our incredible journey back to a time when humanity was young, and every day was a fight for survival and a step towards the future we now inhabit. Our journey begins in Africa, the cradle of humankind. The landscape is a vast and open savanna. Tall grasses ripple in the wind, dotted with acacia trees that provide precious shade. In the distance, great mountains rise towards the sky, their peaks sometimes shrouded in mist. This is the world where our story starts millions of years ago. It is here that a new kind of creature began to walk the earth. These were not yet humans as we know them. They were hominids, our early ancestors, who took the first brave steps on a long and winding evolutionary path. They were pioneers in a world full of challenges. One of the most important changes, they learned to walk upright on two legs. This is called bipedalism. Walking on two legs freed up their hands. With free hands they could carry food, they could carry tools, they could carry even their young children over long distances. This simple but profound change opened up a world of new possibilities. It allowed them to see over the tall grasses, spotting danger from afar, spotting opportunity from afar. It was a crucial adaptation that set them apart and put them on the path to becoming human. Life on the savannah was a constant test of survival. Our ancestors shared this world with many large and powerful animals. There were giant elephants, fierce saber-toothed cats, and enormous hyenas. These creatures were both a source of food and a deadly threat. Our early relatives had to be clever and cautious. They were not the strongest or the fastest animals on the savannah. They relied on their intelligence and their ability to work together to stay safe. Every day was a lesson in observation, learning the habits of the predators and the prey that surrounded them. The climate of this ancient world was not stable. It was a time of great change. Sometimes the climate was warm and wet and the savannah was lush and green. At other times it became cool and dry, and the landscape turned brown and barren. These changes forced our ancestors to adapt or perish. They had to find new sources of food and seek fresh sources of water. They had to travel to new areas to survive. This constant pressure to adapt was a powerful force. It drove their evolution, making them more resourceful and more resilient with each passing generation, slowly shaping them into the beings we would one day become. Our journey now takes us deeper into this prehistoric world. The time is roughly 2 to 3 million years ago. The Earth is a place of raw, untamed beauty. Imagine vast landscapes untouched by human hands. There are no cities, no farms, no roads carving up the land. Instead, we see immense grasslands stretching to the horizon, mighty rivers cutting through deep valleys, dense forests teeming with life. The air itself feels different, cleaner, filled with the unfiltered scents of damp earth, blooming flowers, and roaming animals. This is the stage upon which the first act of the human story will unfold. The climate of this era was in constant flux. It swung between warmer, wetter periods, and cooler, drier times. These changes had a profound effect on the environment. During the wet periods, the African savannas would flourish, lush green carpets, rich with vegetation, supporting a vast number of animals. But during the dry spells, the landscape would transform dramatically. The grasses would wither to a golden brown. Water sources would shrink, forcing life to congregate around the few remaining rivers and waterholes. This constant rhythm of change was the engine of evolution, a relentless test for our ancestors. This world was not a quiet or peaceful place. It was filled with the sounds of nature in its purest form. Imagine the low rumble of a distant volcano, the crack of thunder from a sudden violent storm, the chorus of strange insects at dusk, the calls of unknown birds at dawn. At night, darkness would be absolute, broken only by the brilliant light of the moon and a sea of stars. This was a world that demanded respect and constant awareness. Every sound, every shadow, could mean the difference between life and death. Our early ancestors, the hominids, were a small part of this enormous dynamic ecosystem. They were not the masters of this world. They were simply another species trying to find its place. They had to navigate this challenging environment using their wits and their growing ability to cooperate. The world did not bend to their will. Instead, they had to adapt to its rules. They learned to read the signs of the changing seasons, to find shelter from the storms, and to avoid the many dangers that lurked in the shadows of the forests and the tall grasses of the savanna. Their survival depended entirely on their connection to this wild earth. The animal life of this prehistoric era was truly spectacular. It was a world of giants. Many animals were far larger than their modern relatives. Imagine herds of Deinotherium, an ancient type of elephant with strange, downward-curving tusks on its lower jaw. These colossal beasts roamed the plains. Their immense size was awe-inspiring. Our ancestors watched from a safe distance. They were a potential source of food, but hunting them would be dangerous, needing immense courage and cooperation. A constant, powerful presence on the landscape. The predators were equally terrifying. The most famous of these is the saber-toothed cat, such as Meganterion. Not just a big tiger, a powerful, stocky ambush hunter. Enormous, knife-like canine teeth. Those teeth could mortally wound the largest prey. Our ancestors lived in constant fear of these silent killers. A rustle in the tall grass, a shadow moving at dusk. Secure shelter at night was essential for survival. Dangers weren't limited to cats. Giant hyenas prowled in large packs. Intelligent, relentless scavengers driving off other predators. A direct threat to hominid groups, especially the young or the weak. Our ancestors had to be constantly vigilant, protecting their food and their families. Every meal could become a conflict. Beyond the giants, there was a rich diversity of fauna. Ancient giraffes with strange branching horns. Herds of three-toed horses galloping across the plains. Giant baboons foraging. Strange long-legged pigs rooting for tubers. Enormous crocodiles lurked in rivers and lakes. Our ancestors shared their world with this incredible menagerie. They had to learn the habits and behaviors of each of these creatures. That knowledge was vital for finding food, for avoiding danger, for coexisting with magnificent, deadly beasts. The plant life of this ancient world provided both sustenance and challenges for our early ancestors. The landscape was like a mosaic of different environments, each with its own unique collection of plants. The vast savannas were seas of tall grasses, grasses that defined the ecosystem. They fed the great herds, and those herds fed our ancestors. The tall grasses also hid creatures, hominids trying to stay unseen, and the predators that hunted them. Moving through that grassy ocean required caution and keen senses. Dotted across the savanna, acacia trees, baobab trees. The acacia, thorny and climbable, could offer refuge. Its leaves and seed pods fed many animals. The baobab, called the tree of life, stored water in its trunk. Its fruit was nutritious, its bark provided fibers. Our ancestors would have known these trees intimately, understanding their cycles and the life-giving resources they provided. Near rivers and lakes, dense forests and woodlands, a different world, dark, humid, shadowed by the canopy. Plants here, ferns, vines, fruit-bearing trees, shrubs. Foragers found a giant larder, fruits, nuts, berries, and edible roots. But the forest also hid dangers, snakes, predators, great rewards, high risks. Survival depended on botanical knowledge. built over generations by trial and error. They learned which plants were safe to eat and which were poisonous. They learned which roots were most nutritious and when fruits would ripen. One mistake could cause sickness or death. This wisdom became a mental map, passed from parent to child, allowing them to thrive in a world of green and gold. The daily life of our ancestors was a constant search for food, water, safety. It was honestly a life of immense challenges. But these early hominids possessed a remarkable advantage. They had intelligence and ingenuity. One of the greatest leaps forward in their story was the creation of tools. This did not happen overnight. It was a slow, gradual process of discovery and refinement that took place over millions of years. The very first tools were incredibly simple. They were often just river-worn stones, chosen for their size, weight, and shape. A hominid might have picked up a rock to crack open a tough nut or a bone. This simple act was a revolution. These early tool users were known as the Oldowan toolmakers, named after Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, where many of their tools were found. They learned that some stones could be modified to make them more useful. By striking one stone, the core, with another, the hammerstone, they could break off sharp flakes. These flakes were the first knives. They were small and simple, but they were incredibly effective. A sharp stone flake could slice through an animal's hide, something impossible to do with bare hands. It allowed our ancestors to butcher carcasses and get to the nutritious meat and marrow inside. This was a game changer in their quest for survival. The process of making these tools required skill and foresight. A hominid had to select the right kind of rock, one that would fracture in a predictable way. They needed to understand the angles and the force required to strike the core stone correctly. This was not just a random act of banging rocks together. It was a deliberate, planned activity. It shows us that our ancestors could think ahead. They could hold a mental template of the tool they wanted to create. This ability to plan and execute a task was a significant cognitive step, a sign of their growing intelligence and problem-solving abilities. These simple stone tools opened up a new world of food resources. With sharp flakes, our ancestors could now process animal carcasses left behind by larger predators. They became expert scavengers. They could quickly cut away chunks of meat and smash open long bones to access the rich, fatty marrow. Marrow was a vital source of calories and nutrients, fuel for their increasingly large brains. The tools were not just for butchery. They could also be used to dig for edible roots and tubers, to sharpen wooden sticks into simple spears, or to strip bark from trees. These humble stones were the key that unlocked a much richer diet and a more secure existence. While scavenging was important, our ancestors were not just passive opportunists. Over time they became hunters. Hunting was a far more complex and dangerous activity. It required cooperation, planning, a deep understanding of the animal world. Early hunting focused on smaller prey. Small antelopes, lizards, tortoises. They used simple tools, sharpened wooden spears, throwing rocks to bring down prey. Every successful hunt was a major victory, providing vital protein for the entire group. It was a collective effort that strengthened social bonds. As their intelligence and tools improved, they began to tackle larger prey. This was not a battle of strength. Hominids were no match for the power of a giant buffalo or a wildebeest. Instead, they had to use their wits. They learned to work together as a team. A group of hunters could be far more effective than a single individual. They might have used tactics like driving animals towards a cliff edge, into a muddy swamp, where they would become trapped and easier to kill. This required communication and coordination, with each member of the group playing a specific role in the hunt. The hunt was a testament to their incredible knowledge of the environment. Our ancestors were expert trackers. They could read the signs left by animals, footprints in the dirt, broken branches, fresh droppings. They understood the daily routines of their prey, where they went to drink water, where they rested during the heat of the day. This deep ecological knowledge was passed down through generations. It was a library of survival information stored in their collective memory. They were part of their ecosystem, not separate from it, and they used this intimate connection to their advantage in the great hunt for food. A successful hunt ended with the difficult task of butchering and transporting the kill. This is where their stone tools were essential. The group would work quickly, using sharp flakes to skin the animal, to cut the meat from the bones. They would smash the bones to get to the marrow. Nothing was wasted. Hide for clothing, hide for shelter, bones shaped into new tools. The meat would be carried back to their home base to be shared with the rest of the group, young, the old, those who did not participate in the hunt. This act of sharing was a cornerstone of their society. Our early ancestors did not build permanent houses like we do today. They were nomadic, moving across the landscape to follow animal herds, to find seasonal plants. Their shelters were temporary and simple, designed to provide protection from the elements and from predators. One of the most common forms of shelter was a natural cave or a rock overhang. These rocky shelters offered a ready-made defense. They were cool in the heat of the day and provided a barrier against the cold winds of the night. A good cave, especially one near a water source, was a valuable piece of real estate in the prehistoric world. Where natural caves were not available, our ancestors had to be more creative. They learned to build their own simple shelters: branches, large stones, animal hides. They might have leaned large branches against a rock face or a tree, creating a simple lean-to. In more open areas, they may have arranged stones in a circle to act as a foundation for a small hut, with a framework of branches covered in grasses or hides. These were not grand structures, but they were a home. They were a safe place to sleep, to care for children, and to share food. The home base was the heart of the group's social life. It was a place of safety and community. Some members would leave to hunt, gather food, while others might stay behind to tend to the young, make tools, process food. In the evening, the group would come back together. They would share the results of their day's labor around a central hearth. This was where knowledge was exchanged. An elder might show a younger member how to sharpen a stone tool. Hunters would discuss the day's events, planning for the next hunt. It was in these simple camps that the foundations of human culture were formed. Life in these early homes was not easy. The shelters offered limited protection from severe weather or a determined predator. They had to be constantly vigilant. The camp had to be defended from scavengers like hyenas, who would be attracted by the smell of food. Despite the hardships, these home bases were a crucial innovation. They provided a focal point for the group, a place where they could rest and feel secure. It allowed for a more complex social structure to develop, where individuals had different roles and responsibilities. This creation of a home, however simple, was a vital step in our journey towards becoming human. Our ancestors' lives were transformed by one of the most important discoveries in human history. This was the mastery of fire. At first, they would have encountered fire as a terrifying force of nature. A lightning strike could set the savanna ablaze, sending animals fleeing in panic. Early hominids would have feared this destructive power. But over time, their fear turned to curiosity, and then to understanding. They might have cautiously approached a smoldering tree after a fire had passed. They would have felt its warmth. They may have found roasted animals in the ashes, discovering that cooked food was easier to eat and tasted better. This was the beginning of a new relationship with the flame. The first step was learning to control fire. This meant capturing it and keeping it alive. A group might have managed to get a burning branch from a natural fire and carry it carefully back to their camp. This was a precious resource. The fire had to be fed constantly with dry wood and grass. It could not be allowed to die out. A person, or several people, would have been given the vital job of firekeeper. They were the guardians of the flame. The ability to maintain a fire gave a group a tremendous advantage. It provided a steady source of warmth, a beacon of light in the terrifying darkness of the prehistoric night. The benefits of a controlled fire were immense and changed every aspect of their daily lives. The warmth of the fire allowed our ancestors to survive in colder climates and during the cold nights on the savanna. The light extended their day, allowing them to make tools or socialize after the sun had set. Most importantly, fire was a powerful deterrent against predators. The flickering flames and smoke kept dangerous animals like saber-toothed cats and giant hyenas at a safe distance. For the first time, our ancestors had a reliable way to defend their camp. The hearth became a circle of safety in a very dangerous world. Fire also revolutionized their diet. Cooking food made it safer to eat by killing parasites and bacteria. It also broke down tough fibers and proteins, making food easier to digest and unlocking more nutrients and calories. This meant their bodies could get more energy from the same amount of food. Many scientists believe this dietary improvement was crucial for the development of the large, energy-hungry brains that define our species. From a simple tool for warmth and protection, fire became an engine of our own evolution, fueling the very organ that would allow us to one day understand the stars. The world our ancestors inhabited was not static. It was a planet of dramatic and often unpredictable climate change. For long periods, the Earth would cool down significantly, entering what we call an ice age. These were not times of constant blizzards and frozen wastelands everywhere. Instead, they were periods when huge ice sheets, glaciers kilometers thick, expanded from the poles and covered large parts of North America, Europe, Asia. These cycles of cold and warm periods were driven by subtle changes in the Earth's orbit around the sun. Our ancestors had to adapt to these profound shifts in their world or face extinction. During these colder periods, the environment changed drastically. Sea levels dropped as vast amounts of water became locked up in the ice sheets. This created new land bridges between continents, allowing humans to migrate to new territories, allowing animals to migrate to new territories. The lush savannas of Africa shrank, replaced by drier grasslands, deserts. In Europe, dense forests gave way to open, windswept plains, similar to the tundras of today. The types of animals available to hunt also changed. The warm-weather grazers were replaced by creatures adapted to the cold, such as the woolly mammoth, the woolly rhinoceros, giant deer. Surviving in these colder, harsher environments required new skills and technologies. The simple shelters of the past were no longer sufficient. Our ancestors became better builders, creating more substantial shelters to protect themselves from the biting winds and snow. They used the bones and tusks of large animals like mammoths to create sturdy frames for their dwellings, which they then covered with animal hides. They learned to make warmer clothing, sewing animal skins together using bone needles. This innovation was just as important as any stone tool, allowing them to keep their bodies warm and survive the freezing temperatures. The hunt also had to adapt. Hunting a woolly mammoth was a very different challenge from hunting a savanna antelope. It required even greater cooperation, more sophisticated planning, and better weapons. Our ancestors developed new hunting techniques, perhaps using fire to drive these giant beasts into traps or over cliffs. They created more advanced stone tools like finely crafted spear points to inflict deadly wounds. These periods of intense environmental pressure acted as a powerful filter. They pushed our ancestors to become more intelligent, more cooperative, and more innovative than ever before, shaping them into the resilient beings who would eventually populate the entire planet. Beyond the slow, grinding changes of the ice ages, our ancestors faced a constant barrage of immediate natural threats. Their world was geologically active and honestly, pretty unpredictable. Earthquakes could shake the ground without warning, collapsing caves that provided shelter. Volcanoes were common in places like Africa's Great Rift Valley and could erupt with devastating force. Eruptions could spew hot ash, poisonous gases, and destroy life for miles. Ancestors would have watched these terrifying displays and been forced to abandon homes and territories. Weather was another unpredictable adversary. Violent storms could gather suddenly, bringing torrential rain, hail, and terrifying lightning. Flash floods could sweep through camps in valleys and riverbeds, washing away tools, food, and even people. In dry regions, long droughts were recurring nightmares. Waterholes dried up, plants withered, and herds migrated away. Survival turned into a desperate search for water and for food, a test of endurance and knowledge. Disease and injury were ever-present dangers. A simple cut from a sharp stone tool could become infected. A broken leg could be a death sentence for a lone individual, leaving them unable to hunt, gather, or flee. That's where group strength mattered. Fossils show some survived years with severe injuries. Their companions cared for them. They brought food, water, and protected them. Compassion and social care were key survival strategies. To survive all this, ancestors had to be resilient and aware. They developed an intuitive understanding of their environment. They read subtle signs of an approaching storm or an unstable hillside. They knew safer places to camp and places to avoid. They shared this knowledge, building collective wisdom passed down through generations. Survival wasn't just physical strength or better tools, it came from social bonds, intelligence, and a profound connection to nature's fury and its beauty. As our ancestors grew more intelligent, their lives became more complex. They began to rely on each other more and more. The solitary struggle for survival slowly gave way to the strength of the group. These were the first human communities. They were not large cities or towns, but small, tight-knit bands of perhaps 20 to 50 individuals. These groups were often extended families, a collection of parents, children, aunts, uncles, cousins. Living together was a revolutionary adaptation. It offered greater protection from predators, more success in hunting large animals, and a network of support for raising the young. In a world full of dangers, the group was the ultimate shield. Life within these early communities was built on cooperation. The daily tasks of survival were shared among the members of the band. Some individuals, often the stronger and faster males, might focus on the dangerous task of hunting large game. Others, including females, older members, would concentrate on gathering plant foods. This division of labor didn't mean one job was more important than another. Every contribution was vital for the group's well-being. The food brought back to the camp, whether it was a large animal or a basket of berries, was shared among everyone. This ensured that even the very young, the old, or the sick would have enough to eat. The social bonds within these groups were incredibly strong. They were forged through shared experiences, mutual dependence, and daily interaction. The evening was a particularly important time for the community. As darkness fell and the predators of the night began to stir, the group would gather around the safety of the campfire. This was a time for connection. They would share food, mend tools, and simply spend time in each other's company. These moments of shared peace and security strengthened their relationships. It built trust and a sense of belonging, turning a simple collection of individuals into a true community, a single unit working together for a common goal. Evidence from the fossil record gives us glimpses into this growing social complexity. Archaeologists have found campsites that were used repeatedly over many years, suggesting these bands had a home territory they returned to. The discovery of individuals who lived for years with debilitating injuries provides the most powerful proof of community care. A person with a withered arm or a badly healed leg fracture could not have survived alone. Their survival is a testament to the compassion and support of their group. These were not just animals living side by side, they were becoming deeply social beings, laying the groundwork for families, societies, and civilizations that would follow. The growth of communities brought with it a new and profound challenge: the need for better communication. As tasks like group hunting and child rearing became more complex, simple grunts and gestures were no longer enough. Our ancestors needed a more efficient way to share information, to coordinate their actions, and to express their thoughts. This was the driving force behind the development of language. This did not happen all at once. It was a slow, gradual evolution over thousands of generations. The first steps might have been more complex calls to signal specific dangers like eagle or lion, or to point out a source of food. From these simple beginnings, a more structured system of sounds began to emerge. The physical anatomy of our ancestors was also changing. Their voice boxes or larynxes began to drop lower in the throat. This change, along with modifications to the tongue and lips, allowed them to produce a much wider range of distinct sounds. This physical ability was the hardware for language. At the same time, their brains were growing larger and more complex. Specific areas of the brain like Broca's area and Wernicke's area were developing. These regions are crucial for producing and understanding speech. The mind and body were evolving together to make language possible. Imagine the incredible power this new tool gave them. A hunter could now describe in detail where he saw a herd of deer and what direction they were moving. A gatherer could explain which new plants were ripe for picking and which were poisonous. They could make detailed plans. They could say, "Tomorrow, we will go to the river bend, hide behind the large rocks, and wait for the animals to come to drink." This ability to communicate complex, abstract ideas, including things that were not immediately present, was a monumental leap. It allowed for a level of cooperation that was impossible before, making them incredibly effective and adaptable. Language did more than just improve the practicalities of survival. It changed their inner worlds as well. For the first time, they could share their feelings, their fears, and their memories with others in a clear way. They could tell stories around the campfire, perhaps recounting the events of a great hunt or the legend of a great ancestor. This was the beginning of culture, of a shared history and identity. Language allowed them to think in more complex ways, to form stronger social bonds, and to create a world of shared meaning. It was perhaps the single most important innovation that separated our ancestors from all other creatures on Earth, setting the stage for everything that was to come. With the development of community and language, our ancestors gained a powerful new mechanism for survival: the ability to pass down knowledge through generations. Before this, learning was mostly a process of individual trial and error, or simple imitation. An individual had to discover for themselves which rocks made the best tools, which berries were safe to eat. This was a slow and often dangerous process. If that individual died, their personal knowledge might die with them. But language changed everything. It created a way to store and transmit vast amounts of information. The group's collective experience could now be preserved and built upon. An elder in the group was no longer just an older, weaker member. They became a living library of vital information. They held memories of past droughts, successful hunting strategies, locations of secret water sources. They could teach the younger members the complex art of toolmaking. guiding their hands and correcting their mistakes. They could pass on the detailed botanical knowledge needed to identify hundreds of different plants. This oral tradition was the first form of education. It ensured that the hard-won lessons of survival were not lost, but were instead passed down as a precious inheritance to the next generation. This sharing of knowledge accelerated the pace of innovation. A new idea, such as a better way to attach a stone point to a spear, no longer had to be rediscovered by each individual. Once one person figured it out, they could explain it to others. The idea could spread rapidly through the community and be passed to neighboring groups. This allowed for improvements to be accumulated over time. Toolkits became more sophisticated, hunting techniques became more refined, shelters became more robust. Humanity was now on a path of cumulative cultural evolution, where each generation could start from a higher baseline of knowledge than the one before it. This legacy of knowledge was about more than just practical skills. It also included social rules and traditions. Stories and teachings reinforced the importance of sharing, caring for the sick, cooperating with one another. They created a social blueprint that helped the group function smoothly and resolve conflicts. This shared culture and body of knowledge created a stronger sense of group identity. It bound them together, not just by blood, but by a common understanding of the world and their place within it. This ability to build a collective intelligence was the true secret to our ancestors' success, allowing them to adapt and thrive in an ever-changing world. The journey of our ancestors was now entering a new and profound phase. For millions of years, the focus had been on physical survival and practical innovation. But as communities became more secure and communication more complex, something extraordinary began to happen. The human mind itself seemed to awaken to new possibilities. This was the dawn of symbolic thought. Our ancestors were no longer just seeing the world in terms of food, danger, shelter. They started to see it as a place of meaning, a place where one thing could represent another. This was a cognitive revolution, a fundamental shift in how they perceived reality and their place within it. This change is visible in the artifacts they left behind. We begin to see objects that have no obvious practical function. For example, archaeologists have found pieces of ochre, a natural red or yellow clay pigment, that were clearly scraped and used. They were not for eating or for making tools. It is likely they were used for body painting, to decorate their skin for rituals, to signal their identity within the group. They also started to collect unusual items, shells with natural holes, strangely shaped fossils. They would carry these objects for many miles, suggesting they had a special significance, perhaps as personal ornaments or amulets that brought good luck. This new way of thinking shows a growing self-awareness. Our ancestors were starting to think about who they were. Adorning the body with paint or wearing a shell necklace is a way of saying, "This is me, I belong to this group." It is a form of personal and social identity. This leap into symbolic expression separated them further from the purely functional existence of other animals. They were beginning to build a world not just of things, but of ideas. This internal world of symbols and meanings would become just as important for their survival and development as the external world of rocks and animals. Another powerful sign of this mental awakening is the evidence of intentional burial. In earlier times, a dead companion was likely left where they fell. But now, we start to find deliberate graves. The bodies were sometimes placed in a specific position, such as being curled up on their side. In some cases, they were buried with objects like stone tools, animal bones, flowers, as pollen analysis has shown. This suggests a new set of beliefs about life and death. It implies that death was not seen as a simple end, but as a transition. This act of burying the dead with care shows respect, grief, and perhaps the first glimmerings of a spiritual or religious belief. The symbolic mind of our ancestors eventually found its most spectacular expression. Deep within the darkness of caves, far from the entrance and the light of day, they began to create art. This was not simple doodling. It was a powerful and sophisticated form of creative expression. Using mineral pigments, ochre for reds and yellows, manganese dioxide, charcoal, they painted breathtaking images on the cave walls. These were the first art galleries on Earth, secret sacred spaces filled with the visions of our distant relatives. To reach these chambers, they would have had to crawl through narrow passages, using only the flickering light of animal fat lamps. The subjects of their art were almost always the great animals they shared the world with: horses, bison, mammoths, deer. These animals are not simple stick figures, they are rendered with incredible skill and accuracy, showing a deep knowledge of animal anatomy and behavior. The artists used the natural curves and bulges of the rock wall to give their paintings a three-dimensional quality, making the animals seem to surge from the stone. The effect is dynamic and full of life. It's as if we are looking at a snapshot of the prehistoric world, captured by a master's hand tens of thousands of years ago. Why did they create this art? No one knows for sure, but there are many theories. It's unlikely they were just for decoration, as they are often in the most inaccessible parts of the caves. Some scholars believe the paintings were part of magical or religious rituals. Perhaps painting a successful hunt on the wall was a way to ensure success in the real world, a form of hunting magic. Others suggest the caves were places of initiation, where young members of the group were taught the tribe's secrets and stories. The paintings may have served as visual aids for a shaman or storyteller, bringing the myths and legends of the people to life in the flickering light. Beyond the paintings, we also find other forms of art. Our ancestors carved small portable sculptures from bone, ivory, stone. The most famous of these are the Venus figurines, small statues of female figures with exaggerated features. These may have been symbols of fertility, motherhood, or a mother goddess. They also engraved complex patterns onto their tools and weapons. This love of art and decoration shows that their world was becoming richer and more complex. They were not just surviving, they were creating beauty and meaning. They were expressing their hopes, their fears, and their awe of the natural world, leaving behind a timeless legacy of their creative spirit. The advances in thought, art, and culture were mirrored by an increasing complexity in their social lives. As human populations grew, groups began to interact with each other more frequently. This was not always peaceful, as competition for resources could lead to conflict. However, there is also strong evidence of trade and exchange networks. Distinctive types of stone for toolmaking have been found hundreds of kilometers away from their original source. This means that either groups traveled vast distances or they traded these valuable materials with their neighbors. These networks created connections between different communities, allowing for the exchange of goods, ideas, even people. Society itself was becoming more structured. While the basic unit was still the small, mobile band of hunter-gatherers, there were likely recognized leaders or elders whose wisdom was respected. The shaman or spiritual leader who guided the rituals in the painted caves would have held a position of great importance. The skilled toolmaker, or the most successful hunter, would also have earned high status within the group. Social roles were becoming more defined. This did not mean a rigid hierarchy like in later societies, but it shows a move towards a more organized social structure where different individuals had different responsibilities and levels of influence based on their skills and knowledge. This growing complexity also led to technological innovation on a larger scale. Our ancestors were now creating a much wider variety of specialized tools. Instead of one all-purpose hand axe, they now had a whole toolkit for different tasks. Fine, sharp blades for cutting, scrapers for preparing animal hides, burins for engraving, bone needles for sewing. They developed new hunting technologies such as the spear thrower, or atlatl. This device acted as an extension of the arm, allowing a hunter to throw a spear with much greater force and accuracy. This made them even more effective predators, able to hunt from a safer distance. This period, known as the Upper Paleolithic, represents the final major step in our ancestors' journey to becoming fully modern humans. They had sophisticated tools, complex social networks, rich symbolic cultures, and stunning art. They had successfully adapted to a huge range of environments: warm plains of Africa, frozen tundra of Ice Age Europe. They were no longer just another species of hominids struggling to survive. They were Homo sapiens, wise humans, who had begun to shape the world around them in a way no creature had ever done before. Their journey was far from over, but they now possessed all the creative, social, intellectual tools they would need for the future. Our long journey back through time is now drawing to a close. We have walked across the ancient savannas of Africa, we felt the biting winds of Ice Age Europe, we have witnessed the first simple stone tool being struck, we gazed upon magnificent art deep within the earth. We have seen our ancestors as small, vulnerable hominids, and later as masters of their world. This incredible saga of survival, ingenuity, and adaptation is not just a story about the distant past. It is our own story. The challenges they faced and the solutions they found are deeply embedded in who we are today, shaping our bodies, shaping our minds, shaping our societies in countless ways. Every time we cooperate with others to solve a problem, we echo the teamwork of an ancient hunt. The ability to work together, to communicate a plan, to trust our companions, forged in prehistoric survival. It was the key to bringing down prey far larger and stronger than any single human. This instinct for collaboration lets us build cities, run hospitals, explore space. The social bonds that held small bands together became the foundation of our families and of our communities. The need for connection, for belonging, for mutual support, inherited from ancestors huddled around a campfire. The legacy of their ingenuity is all around us. Every tool we use, every technology we create, the simple act of shaping a stone with purpose, the first spark of an inventive fire. That spark led to the spear thrower, then to the wheel, and eventually to the computer you might be using now. Our ancestors' relentless curiosity, their ability to observe the world, to identify a problem, to devise a creative solution, the engine of progress, the cognitive leap to see a knife within a rough stone, is the same thinking that lets a scientist see a new theory within data. Even our relationship with the world carries echoes of our ancient past. Our appreciation for nature, the peace we feel in a forest, the awe at a star-filled sky. These feelings may be remnants of when survival depended on intimate connection with the environment. Our ancestors knew the rhythms of the seasons, the habits of animals, the properties of plants. Many of us now live in cities far removed from that wild world, yet a part of us still remembers. The story of ancient humans is the story of how we became us. Resilience and creativity written across millions of years. Reflecting on this immense journey, it is hard not to feel a sense of profound wonder. The path from the first hominids walking upright on the African plains to the globally dominant species we are today was not guaranteed. It was a perilous and uncertain road, filled with countless challenges and near extinctions. For every one of our direct ancestors who survived to pass on their genes, many others perished. We are the beneficiaries of an unbroken chain of survival stretching back millions of years. Every single one of our ancestors, in their own time and in their own way, successfully navigated a world of danger to give the next generation a chance at life. This story teaches us a powerful lesson about adaptation. They did not thrive because they were the strongest. They did not thrive because they were the fastest. They thrived because they were the most adaptable. When the climate changed, they found new ways to live. When old food sources disappeared, they discovered new ones. When faced with new threats, they invented new tools. They invented new strategies. This flexibility, the ability to change and to innovate in the face of adversity, is perhaps our most important defining characteristic. It is a reminder that our ability to solve problems is our greatest strength, a skill honed over countless millennia of trial and error in a constantly changing world. The journey of human evolution, however, is not a story that has ended. Evolution is a continuous process, and we are still a part of it. The world we have created is now presenting us with a new set of challenges: global climate change, new diseases. These are problems of our own making, born from the very success of our species. The survival of our ancestors depended on their ability to adapt to natural forces beyond their control. Our survival may depend on our ability to wisely manage the immense power we now wield over the planet itself. The wisdom we need can be found by looking back at the resilience and cooperation of our ancestors. The story of ancient humans is ultimately a story of connection. It connects us to the deep past, to the earth beneath our feet, and to each other. It shows us that for all our modern differences in culture, technology, we are one family, descended from a small group of brave and resourceful individuals who dared to explore, to create, to dream. Their legacy is not written in stone, in our DNA, in our societies, in our unquenchable curiosity. Their journey has now become our own. The next chapter is still waiting to be written by the choices we make today, as we continue this incredible, unending human adventure.